Hey, what's good? It's your boy Ryan. Welcome to the Relevancy channel. I'm here with my first review, which is a book review actually. So if you haven't seen my introduction video, I am doing reactions. I'm doing book reviews, may talk about some blogs. I may talk about some people that we're familiar with. I do have a blog or a couple blogs or a couple people that blogs that I kind of want to, discuss and get everyone's opinion. And I may just get on here and just talk about life, as a parent right now, single parent right now, kind of. Um, just work, being an everyday working man. And yeah, just having a normal life. Just trying to figure things out, right? And yeah, so we're gonna get into the first book review or this is actually my first video on the channel outside of the introduction. This is actually my first video on the channel, which I'm kind of excited about it. All right. So we'll be reviewing one of my favorite books. You'll probably hear me say that on every book review. Like every book review is probably gonna be one of my favorite books, right? Um, but yeah, so we'll go over The Devil You Know, a Black Power Manifesto by Charles Blow. I recently read this probably like I wouldn't even say a month ago, probably like 2 weeks ago. So I physically have the book, but I listen through audiobook from Audible. I just got it from the library because I'm still trying to learn the whole like how to navigate um the screens and stuff like that. So if y'all know somebody that could help me out, then definitely. But I'm definitely gonna deep dive it and learn all that stuff too. Uh, it's only my first video. Be patient with me. However, like I said, this will be the first review. I'll listen to it. I got a long drive to work. I drive a lot on the weekends, back and forth to Savannah, where I'm from. Um, and yeah, it's very it's essentially about the Great Migration that happened 100 years ago, or close to a little over 100 years ago, and throughout the I would say early 1970s. Um, and this Great Migration was essentially to escape the I guess I want to say the horrors of the Deep South or the horrors of the South. Um, the start of Jim Crow, obviously, us not having the same, not being afforded the same opportunities, whether you're black man, black woman, black children, excuse me, not being afforded the same opportunities. So a lot of our people within the communities just said, "Hey, I think there's opportunity up north, so why not just flee? Why not just leave and come from the south and then go up north to where we can have better education, whatever the case may be, right? A better life in general. And then in this book, it's essentially Charles Blow saying, like, hey, we have the opportunity to gain power as a community actually coming back to the south. So let's get away from those destination cities, which what they were called, and then let's come back to the south where we're starting to gain momentum. We're starting to have a little power, and we can have some type of control as a community and gain more freedom, more liberty. You know, so. Um, so yeah, I'll just go ahead and get started. The book's epigraph began with James Baldwin, which he stated the difference between the North and the South is how they castrate you, but the fact is they castrate you, and that's an American fact. All right, it's probably not verbatim, but that's essentially what James Ball is saying. And hey, there may be a difference in the way that they do it, but trust and believe. They do it in the South, they do it in the North, and then actually there was like a couple of maybe like I'm not sure like a chapter or sometime later on in the book, still early in the book, where Malcolm X saying, "Hey, stop saying that you live in the North, so you don't live in the South. Like anything south of Canadian." is the South because you're in America and you black in America. All right. So that wasn't what he said verbatim. However, it was something along those lines. All right. The book starts, the first chapter, the book starts with um the author, Charles Blow, visiting Timuel Black. So Timuel was actually he's a historic figure. He recently passed away. I'm not sure specifically when 100%, but he was 102 years old, so he lived a long time. So he was a great source of information. He was a great source of granular information for the author to specifically for what he was writing about, right? Little bit of things about Tim. He marched with Dr. King, and he actually mentored, and he brought the Obama campaign to Chicago, and also he was a part of the Great Migration. So his dad, his mom, they moved from Mississippi up to Chicago, right? Um, and I'll be going over a couple more notes. So if you see me look down, that's essentially what I'm doing. I don't want to waste time and like flick through the book. Um, but as he sat down with Tim, yeah, like I said early in the video, he wanted to they his family, just like everyone else, wanted to escape the brutal conditions. They discussed the black organizations in the north, and once everyone from the south began to like migrate, not everyone left because some families that left early, they got there, they got on the train, and they called it like the chicken bone train or whatever because they ate, a lot of families packed bags and packed a lot of lunches, dinners, and they ate food and they would leave it where, you know, they would leave their food, they would leave their trash on the train, right? So now there were black organizations in the North, particularly in his case, Tim was in Chicago, that would essentially go over like customs and courtesies and etiquette to how to behave when you come from the South. So one of those things were just watch how you talk when you're in public. All right, watch who you look at when you were in public, or watch how you stare, how you look at white people when you're in public, and no spitting on the ground, things like that. All right. But for the most part, everyone fled for economic and educational opportunity. Economic more so for the adults, educational for the kids for a better life, right? Makes sense. Um, Now, once this happened, um, the and Charles says it in the book, there was actually a thing where white Northerners used to look down on white Southerners as kind of with shame, you know? Like, how can you treat people like that? Only to kind of revert to that same way of life and adopt that same culture that they had in the South, right? Of just being very, very reckless with how they treat blacks, um, not wanting to be near any of the blacks. And that was evident when you had like black migrants, what they called, and they started to, make a little money, and then they wanted to move from black belts to white neighborhoods. All right. And obviously, they didn't want that. It's like, hey, you move here, you stay in your place, you stay where you are, and we're gonna be happy where we are. So we don't really care what you do over there, but do not come over here. And then there was this thing where even if you rent it to black black families, anyone in the black community, you would be you would be hassled. All right, you would definitely be abandoned by your community, by the white community, and that kind of somewhat led into the riots as well. There was riots in 1919. There was riots in Chicago, and I believe before there were also riots, or throughout that whole summer there were riots in I think St. Louis. Um, Earlier that time there was a massacre near Orlando, Florida, where just a bunch of blacks got killed in Orlando, which yeah, sounds crazy, but those were the times that we were in. All right. So that came from those riots within the Midwest, St. Louis, Chicago. Just that's they were like a reflection of what's to come within the Great Migration. All right. So blacks moving from the south to the north. Um, and it was the tough part about it was there were actually blacks that owned land in the south, only to go to the north and then be told like, hey, you can't even move in this neighborhood, you can't even be around us in this neighborhood, so let alone you think about owning some property. And that was that led to the riots of blacks saying, hey, we're not just gonna be tortured and beaten, we just escaped that, we're gonna fight back. So a lot of people died on both sides, black and white. A lot of people died. A lot of casualties occurred during that time and during that time of that summer and just during those events. Um, but he started the book with that, and Timuel was a very great source within that. Um, but he then moves to the second chapter, where it starts getting really interesting, with the proposition. And what he's stating is blacks should return to the South for political and moral reasons. So political reasons, all right? So you can gain, there was something in here saying that we aren't electing each other, believe it or not. So a lot of even Obama, like there were more, or not Obama, take that back, sorry. Most politicians within their city or their state, if they're black, a lot of them are being elected by white people or white, just like white peers or just white citizens. All right, which isn't not so much a bad thing, right? Because if you have a political agenda that anyone and everyone can agree upon, then that's what it is, right? It's not a bad thing. However, it does hurt our people only because if said politician only gets 5% of the black vote, but that politician gets 55, 60% of the white vote, if I'm white or just in general, not really about race, what are you gonna do for me? Right? I voted for you. And then you see that, and then there's only a few very minute amount of the black population that voted for you. I kind of have to go and sway my loyalty to the white population, unfortunately, right? Um, and it's not so much of being bought, it's kind of a loyalty thing. I have to help someone who helped me and not have to as in I'm being threatened to, or which may be the case, but not have to as in I'm being threatened to, or like someone's making me do these things, but I don't want to burn any bridges from people that help me, right? So those are one of the things that he spoke to, creating representative democracy. Um, and something that I learned, and he was very punctual when it came to stats, events pertaining to his propositions or his strategies. So things that have already happened in history, how we can repeat those things to happen again. however, to benefit our community, right? And one of the things I learned was the more people, this may be like basic information, and you would think probably if I'm reading a book like this that I should know this. However, the more people you have in the state, the more electoral votes that you have, right? So his thing is like, hey, if we get more blacks in Georgia, um, this can actually, you know, this can actually help us. We can have some control on on a national political stage, right? Um, and we'll still have some control on a state level too. However, he was speaking from a national stage when you mentioned electoral votes and talking about presidency and stuff like that. Um, but also he to relate to like the proposition and having some type of political power within the state is he talked about Vermont and the hippie movement and how he said it very particular. He went into detail of how they gained control of Vermont and how they were able to rally throughout time. And now Vermont is a very liberal state and they control what they want to control, right? But this started in the 70s, and it's been the way Vermont is now was because of how they gathered, how they agreed on a particular plan, or not even a particular plan, but just the general notion of we know specifically how we want to live. We know what kind of culture we want here, and we know what we want to represent here. So we're gonna put one of ours in the office, rally behind them, and then we're gonna figure out our beefs or whatever disagreements we may have specifically with policies and all that stuff within each other, right? So he used that as an example, which is a very good example because it was something I wouldn't even think about. um as Vermont, I'm not aware of anything Vermont history. So that was really a really good example. And that was the second chapter, the proposition. So he talked about basically trying to gain political control, right? The third chapter, the push. So I remember listening to this chapter. Um, I work nights, so I'm up all night. So that's when I do like my cooking on like my day off, right? And um, it was crazy because I'm not really like I don't watch scary movies or anything similar to that. I watch thrillers and mysteries, if anything, somewhat. But listening to that third chapter was really it it like scared me. And that was the first time where I said to myself, or I felt bad, one, and I said to myself, I really need to get into politics and I need to follow it more. And essentially what he discussed, what he talked about was a few things. One of them being stop and frisk. So, um, and I actually talked to my brother about it recently, and he mentioned he just got out of probation. But he was saying he was very familiar with it, right? And he was like, "Yeah, stop and frisk is like was a huge thing in New York. Like I remember hearing about it, and we're in the South. And we're I'm from Savannah. We're living in Savannah, but his thing is, or I just hearing him say that it was it was very telling, and it was very it meant a lot because listening to how he explained it, how Charles explained it in the book, um, it was a very tactical strategy to increase increase the prison population, increase finding, and increase police harassment on minorities, not even just blacks, but just minorities. So stop and frisk was very vital in not just New York, but and it's still in the South as well, but in destination cities all around the country, right? And then he even got even more detailed. So Mike Bloomberg, who was a politician in the country, um, he forced stop and frisk, increased marijuana arrests on minorities, and he said at one of the at like a conference, I think it was the Aspen conference, he mentioned that he felt that there actually wasn't enough police in doing enough stop and frisk. There are enough police, but they actually didn't stop and frisk enough minorities because hey, that's where all the crime is, right? So that was his thing. So he actually said that in the national, like in the public conference to everyone, right? And Charles gathered some very powerful stats. These stats were essentially there were more stop and frisk at one point in time than than there were the amount of minorities in that particular area, and I think it was New York. Um, so there was a chance that people were getting stopped and frisked more than once within a small amount of time, which is just crazy, right? But that was just showing the pressure of how the government, and that's what people mean by the system. And I used to hear it a lot, and I never really understood it. It's not that I ignored it. I don't put nothing past, you know, the system or America's systems when it comes to mistreatment of blacks. However, I just wasn't educated and I just wasn't 100% on what people would mean unless I would listen to watch an interview or listen to someone speak about it, right? So when he broke that down, that was just very um, it was just very interesting. But again, it was like, yo, this is nuts. This is crazy. And then Louisiana is the um has the most prison has the highest prison population in the world, right? In the world. It's just crazy. Um They are the highest prison population in the world. In 2016, New York made $1 billion off of fines just due to stop and frisk and pulling people over for marijuana and like weed, in which you can make money now, right? And something I didn't know, my brother actually like told me, and he kind of told me like, yeah, how do you not know that? But 70% of people in jail, whether it's county, I'll say county, I'll stick with county. But he was saying over 70% of people in jail actually aren't charged with anything. They're just being held, right? Now, understanding that things have to be processed, there's a lot of processing going on when you actually decide to like take someone to jail and actually hold them, taking their freedom, taking their freedom away. But 70% is a very astounding number, and it just goes to show that hey, this whole prison thing is a system, is a political way um to I would say like to go against minorities because who else will they, right? And it's just history continues to repeat itself. But it's also an economic way, which leads me to um, him also mentioning that sheriffs are actually owning like stocks of these prison publicly traded companies, which is something I knew nothing about, right? Um, I knew nothing about there being publicly traded companies from prisons. I think one of them's Core Civic, and the other, I'll look it up real fast. Should have got that one down. I think it was Core Civic and GEO. Yeah, it was Core. I know it was Core Civic. Was one of them, and yeah, Core Civic and GEO Group were the two. Well, at least they're like one of the two biggest publicly traded prison companies, right? So yeah, so that was like and it's funny that he titled that chapter The Push because he's trying to get the point across of, hey, this is affecting, if it's not affecting you, at least someone, and which, that old irony, talking to my brother, someone who's been in the prison system, someone who's been in jail, it's affected them. It's affected your family. You can't escape it. If you're a minority, you can't escape it. All right. Maybe you, which is selfish to say, being African American, if you want to ignore it, right? Um, yeah, maybe you in particular can escape it, but you have family members that's gonna be, chances are they're gonna be affected by whether it's stop and frisk, going to prison, being pulled over, being fined, being arrested from having marijuana. Um, so yeah, or being part of the $1 billion fines that was in New York City in 2016 from these stop and frisk, right? Also, um, I didn't get the number, but the majority of bail bond that were paid in New York City were from minority women. And then having a conversation with Tamir Rice, and then he actually started off the push chapter with his son being, um, he got an officer pulled a gun, draw his weapon on him, and they didn't have a reason. And it kind of went to his point about the whole book of, I worked all my life, I escaped the South to send my son to Yale, only to for him to experience the same thing that he went through when he was in Grambling University, of an officer stopping him and pulling their weapon on him, right? Um, so this in this chapter, speaking with Tamir Rice's mother and experiencing that pain with her, empathizing with her, however, not really knowing what to do, um, just comforting her and ensuring that she knew, like, hey, I'm here with you, I'm here with you, sis. Um, and just getting her experience to better understand what we can do as a community to not so much really change it, because I don't know if we change where we are. Uh, However, we make our situation better by, understanding these things, understanding these policies. And you'll read, like, he'll mention the policies and he'll get into like Obama and stuff like that. Um, that's causing these things to happen. And, by us making the case constantly, by us coming to the South, us being, having at least some type of control and some type of say in preventing this stuff like this from happening, especially the Tamir Rice case. Um, and then he goes on to the pull. So the pull is like um, basically the, hey, we why we should do this, why we should come back home, um, with there being over 30% of African Americans in the South alone, and that's including the West Coast, that's including the North, that's including the Midwest. Out of all those areas, there's 30% in the South alone, right? So the reason is economic interest and just persuasion, right? Just morally and like the culture and the opportunity that we have here. With us having 30% people here, we have a lot of like we have black culture here. Like I'm born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. Savannah is majority black. There's a black chief. There was a black mayor, Mayor Floyd Adams. I had black teachers growing up. And the cost of living, not only in Savannah, but throughout the state of Georgia, throughout the South, Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina, in the South in general. Like the cost of living here is definitely affordable. And then being persuaded through like kind of what we're starting, somewhat to chapter two. However, we kind of start what the proposition was from chapter two. We're kind of starting it right now. So the ability and the push to gain political power, we're kind of starting to see that. And he went through it. As far as saying we have young black mayors in Jackson, Mississippi, in Birmingham, and in Richmond, Virginia, right? So Richmond, Virginia is the South, in case everyone doesn't know. All right. So over like I mentioned, over 30% blacks live in the South. We'll have a black regionalism. 82,000 millennials from 2014 up until now. Well, up until that point, he wrote the book in 2021. 82,000 millennials migrated to the South. All right. So um that's that persuasion and that's that extra I would say boost and that extra, you know, saying like, hey, we're doing something right. Like we're doing it. We're starting to do it. We need to do it more. However, we're starting to do it and it's working. Um and he mentioned there was a stat about Jackson, Mississippi. Is the city is the most populated black city with over 100,000 people. I gotta see exactly what he said because again, I listened a lot. I got the book physically from the library, but I listened to the book a lot. So my notes, I didn't really get that notes. I try not to get too many statistical notes. Um, however, yeah. So like Jackson, Mississippi is majority very, very populated with black people. Um, and then into entrepreneurship. Southern cities doing the best in home ownership and entrepreneurship. Houston, Jacksonville, Austin, Texas, San Antonio, Texas. Black-owned businesses. Georgia, Virginia, Tennessee, Alabama, North Carolina, Louisiana. That's in the country. All right. So there's not. This isn't being ranked in the like in the southern category. These are the top like out of 10 states. These are the top 10, like these are six of the top 10 states in the country with black owned businesses. And then black owned companies, cities with the most thriving and more black owned companies, Memphis, Atlanta, and Montgomery. And that's in the country. Right. So we already know like Atlanta. Memphis did catch me by surprise. And I have a friend that I wouldn't say a friend, but someone I went to high school with. They're big into investing. They moved to Alabama and think I shot him like a messenger or like just a message like, "Hey, like you in Alabama now?" Because he was living overseas. He was like, "Yeah, yeah, it's cool. Like I like it." And then I am starting to see those shows on Bravo. Um, I think the housewife shows. That just shows and displays successful black families, successful black professionals, successful black people, right? But those are the three cities that had more black-owned companies. Carol Mosley Braun was quoted saying something along the lines of, "This wouldn't be a new strategy, all right? We've been trying to do this, and we've mentioned this for for forever now. It's just actually, obviously, it's just actually like trying to put it in motion and getting it done. But Carol Mosley Braun's the second black senator, was the second black senator in the country. So, and then her stating that was kind of like it reminded me of a reiteration of Killer Mike mentioning in interviews that, hey, like show some grace to each other, like show some grace to black people, because we haven't been free for long, and we're already gaining some type of control, we're already gaining some type of little bit of power, and we're just starting to be successful as a black community, right? I'm being a little long-winded, but he talked about controlling states to enact reparations. So there's already states in the South that are like starting to discuss reparations. Florida, I know, is one of them, and there's a few more. Public education is on the state level, as well as Medicaid or Medicare is on the state level, which is something that I didn't know. Me having a 12-year-old son, public education is has been like almost abandoned. All right. Lovey Ajayi actually wrote a blog saying how she went to high school graduation, and it was almost like she felt almost embarrassed, and she was just so surprised that a lot of our black kids didn't know basic grammar, basic English. They can barely speak to what they're saying. And yeah. So I didn't know public education was on the state level. Same thing as health. And yeah, that was the push, and then the last chapter, which was not the last chapter, but the second to the last chapter, which was hoping and waiting. Hoping and waiting comes from religion, so us being like religious, which is why a lot of blacks, I remember like a lot of blacks that used to say, it's kind of bad. There's like a bad being a Christian because those you adopt those traditions, that idea and that way of thinking as black people of, whether it's like continuously pray, God will see you, God will look after you, God will look out for you, stuff like that. However, he put it essentially like, hey, we can't afford that. We've been waiting and hoping for years. My grandma waited. My mother waited. My great grandmother waited for freedom. My great grandmother waited for liberty and justice, right? Um, and there was a part of a speech by Dr. King. Again, like I'm not going to be quoting these people, these very, very important people, um, and these very vital people in our community and our community's history. But it was something along the lines of white people got farms and they were taught how to farm, and they were given resources for how to farm, how to sustain their land to be a successful farmer, right? Black people ain't get nothing. You know what I'm saying? So it was like part of that kind of goes to like religion, how he was explaining to it. And then colorism, how there was a point in time where mulatto is a light skinned, a more lighter black person. So hence the rapper, like her name is mulatto, her skin color, right? She has nothing to do with the book. I'm not Please, she has nothing to do with the book. Not like I'm not even doing that. I'm not saying anything bad about her. Just specifically colorism and mulatto. Um, and how, yeah, how George Washington. I don't know what I wouldn't say it was a beef. You got to read the book. You got to listen to the book. Well, when he talks about George Washington Carver, he kind of go in, all right, but he has some good points because George Washington Carver would kind of what he would say would kind of balance I want to make white people happy, but I want to be the black person that speaks up for us. But you, at that time, you couldn't do both, right? You just couldn't. Like you can't say jobs are being sent away or taken by young white people. That's why they're mad. That's why they're upset. And kind of in a way, without saying it, like what do we have to complain about? Like we're free. We're free from slavery when we're really, really not free. I didn't know George Washington Carver was that, which speaks to like, and I felt so good reading this book because I finally have someone that done research. I even sound lazy saying it. Someone did their research and they discuss what the figures that was taught to us in school, the people that were told that were heroes to us and people that we should look up to in school. Um, These are the things that they said. These are the things that they did. This is the weight that they held. These were the positions that they held, whether it was in a community or just in America in general. Because at the time, George Washington Carver was over W.E.B. Du Bois, the most, I would say, prominent black in America. Um, and then him, yeah, him looking at talking about Woodrow Wilson enforcing Jim Crow, uh, and then looking towards the future. So again, and then he wraps it up in like a really really cool way, like, hey, just come back home, just come back to the South, right? Let's reverse this great migration. Let's leave those destination cities that's causing us police brutality, systemic racism, whether it's economic, whether it's socially, and just come back home. Just come back home. And we can gain some type of black power. We can gain some type of control within our own community. So we can fight these things and have some sense of liberty and some sense of a greater sense of a much greater sense of freedom, right? I think the only thing that I only took away great from the book or good things from the book. I appreciated the author Charles Blow for writing this book, and I I loved it. I listened to it twice, full, all the way through. Um, it was greatly narrated, and yeah, yeah, definitely up there. One of my favorite books. It's a social book. I think the only question that I would have is the physical and mental health death and its effect. Um, so look, how that would look as far as far as us migrating down down to the south, and even like where we are right now, would that have an effect on? Can there be anything that would sort of uh, mitigate any type of black power or any gain of a black power like system and some type of control from physical and mental health? Because I know a lot of like the black community suffers with a lot of physical health issues, whether it's diabetes. um, I have like high cholesterol that's hereditary from my father, but heart disease, just a lot of like cancers and stuff like that. So those are one of the things. And for me, the biggest thing right now and the biggest question that's like you see it on the news with celebrities is not even interracial marriage, but just interracial relationships and how that'll impact thinking and persuasion of black living with majority black control, right? Um, so I have some links that I'm gonna drop, including the article that discussed Mike Bloomberg and what he stated at that convention, and as well as the interracial marriage statistics, which I think I just wish that was something that I could like present to him or just ask and just get his opinion on it and get what he thinks. Um, it was a very long-winded video, but this book was really, really good. it was fantastic. It was an illustrious way of describing and pulling someone in, and especially like someone, black people. So I would highly recommend. Please go get, even if you don't actually like order it and buy it, which I think you should, put it on your nice bookshelf. Go to the library, and yeah. So sorry for the long review. I'll try to keep these short, but again, welcome to the channel. Thank you for being here. Let's reply and respond. Let me know what you think, and like, comment, subscribe. Peace.